Hi, and welcome to Marketing Optimization with Alex Designs. I'm your host, Alex Harris, and I'm very happy today to have Tommy Walker. He's the editor at ConversionXL.com. How you doing, Tommy?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on, Alex.
Awesome. To get started, I like to ask, what is your definition of optimization and why is it beneficial?
I think that landing page optimization and optimization in general is really interactive storytelling. I come from a film acting background before I ever got into marketing. And what I've learned from that is that you can keep people engaged as long as you're telling stories that they want to be told. From the landing page optimization standpoint, and really any optimization, search engine optimization, on-site optimization, any of that type of stuff, you're really just trying to give people what they're looking for. And knowing what their story is, the story that they're trying to solve, what's the end result that they're looking for, you can build out that whole experience once you know what they're looking for and how you can really help them. So I think that's beneficial because when you look at it from that perspective of how do I get the most out of this site, how do I get the most out of the experience that I'm having, it puts this different framework. Instead of going, okay, I got to work on this one page at a time, you look at the bigger picture and from a perspective that is kind of outside of what you are as the creator, but more as a visitor.
Now, you wrote a great post on ConversionXL.com related to the landing page optimization guide you wish you always had. And that is a great way for us to talk about in this episode.
Sure. So landing page, I mean, if you're on the podcast, I imagine you already have some you're familiar with what a landing page really is. But what it really is, to me anyways, is the way to cut out all of the noise from all of the different search experiences out there, all the different social media experiences out there, and say, this is what you're here for, right? This is what this page is about. You know, you see it with this. This is the guide you are looking for. This is the product you're looking for. This is what it's all about, right?
Yeah, this is the problem that you're trying to solve.
Right. This is the problem you're trying to solve. That's all this page is about. We're going to talk about the problem, the features, the benefits, and by the end of the page, hopefully, you will have been convinced that we are going to be the solution to help you solve that problem. And actually, a really good example of this, and I love what Copyblogger does with their landing pages. If you type in content marketing, they're going to be the top result. And they have what they essentially did was transform their category page on their website into a landing page that does this soft sell of like, okay, here are all the different things you need to know about copyright or content marketing. Mm-hmm. We have these great resources. We have this behind the scenes, community that's all about that. And it really kind of gives you this real introduction to what content marketing is about. Whereas if you look at everything else that's in that search query, you're just going to get a lot of articles. And it kind of says like what they've done is essentially said, let's bring you into our brand and give you as much value as possible in a short amount of time on one single page.
Yeah, and before you even create a landing page or put together the right sales funnel, you really need to be able to find your target audience. And that's what your first step is in the landing page optimization guide, is really understand your target market. So what would be some tips for someone to figure out who to market to?
The first thing would be really, get to know. What we do is a lot of qualitative research, right? I will go out there and say to my existing customer base and to people who might be in my customer base, prospects, who are you? What do you do? What are your concerns around this particular subject, right? If I were to talk about content marketing, for example, what are the challenges you have with this? What are the things that you've seen? Where have you been burned, right? But also, I try to get more perspective on where they are in their lives. Like, what kind of company do you work for? Are you married? Do you have kids? What kind of music do you listen to? What kind of movies do you watch? For some people, that type of what kind of movies do you watch and what kind of music do you listen to? Those questions, they might think that doesn't really matter. But my thought is if I am going to be I look at my computer screen. I don't know about you, but I look at my computer screen the same way that I've always looked at my television, right? I expect more from it, but I expect the same level of entertainment or compellingness, right? We use that word a lot. Compellingness from the stuff I see on the screen. As an optimizer, what I try to do is figure out what other things are visually appealing to my ideal market. That gives me some idea of how I can design to create something that I already know is going to stand out. They're already predisposed to like this type of color palette because these other brands that they interact with use this. They already like these types of images because they like these types of movies, right? All of that stuff, our media profiles say a lot about who we are as people. If I like Scott Pilgrim versus the World as a movie, that's going to tell you kind of an idea of like, I might be a good target market for thinkgeek.com, right? Like it's all that type of stuff. It's all contextual because we're only made up of so much stuff, right? As far as preferences are concerned. So if I can learn as much about your preferences as possible, that makes my entire design process and my entire value proposition, everything else so much easier because I get an understanding of the language you use. I get an understanding of the visuals that appeal to you, and all of that other type of stuff. And I think that the biggest problem with a lot of the optimization that's out there is that we're not doing that part first, right? We're not going, who are you and what do you like? We're going, do you like this? Let me create this thing and then do you like it? And you can A/B test from there and do an iterative process, of course, but you're also kind of you're kind of starting a little behind the game because you don't have as much information about the person that's going to be on that page as possible. So
yeah, well, I love that you started off with it, that it's really important to figure out what those qualitative metrics are, because once you're able to really have that type of relevancy, it can be really clear that the target customer is at the right place when they arrive there, because it's going to be relevant to them. You're empathizing with their problems. You're understanding where the right customer and knowing who the right customer to market to is going to allow you to have better conversions.
Absolutely. And that also gives you an understanding, like, there are going to be different personas within that market too. Once you have that sort of basic idea, you can start asking yourself, what keywords would an advanced person in this market be using versus a medium, person, or an intermediate or a beginner, right? People are going to be searching for different things. So if you can create as close to a one-to-one experience for what they're looking for, your conversion rates are going to go up.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at 99% of the search engine marketing ads that are out there right now, they're not really targeted towards much, right?
Yeah.
They're just kind of saying like, here's an ad, here's a page, buy from us. And it doesn't really, it gives me no sort of perspective or no sort of grounding when I get to that page.
Yeah, even big brands do this really wrong. They just assume that the customer is going to know what they're talking about, and making those assumptions. As a designer, you're just not designing it for yourself and not designing it directly for the customer to solve their problem.
Right.
So, as you're setting up landing pages, what type of actionable goals do you create for those conversion KPIs?
Well, I'm looking at things like click-through rates. Basically, as I'm looking at an analytic, any sort of metrics, I'm asking like, what do I want the page to do, and how do I make it better? Right. And that's pretty much that, right? If I want people to sign up for an email list, right, I will track how many signups I get from that page, and then test from there. If I'm looking for people to click on the Buy Now button, I'm going to see what I can do to get people to click on the Buy Now button. When I design a page, though, I'm really trying to look at everything else that leads up to that process of them getting there, to make every part of that funnel better. So by the time they get to that page, I try to make it, and some other conversion people might think I'm crazy for this, but I try to make it so it doesn't really matter what wording's on that button. They've already had so much desire built up by the time they reach it that it's there. And I look at that from because I come from a film background. I look at that whole experience like when I go to the movies, for example, and I see a trailer for another movie, right? There doesn't need to be a really direct call to action for me to go see that next movie. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's no super direct, like call to action. I am going to be so interested in what it is that's out there that that I'm just going to go.
Yeah, I think that ties into the emotional aspect of why people make decisions online, because more than likely people don't know that they need to buy something when they're arriving at your site.
Right.
So those triggers that you're setting them up to get to it's the next part of the landing page guide that I want to talk about, is making sure that your message matches your landing page.
Yes.
And the first impression that they get from that. Are there any tips in your guide that you could share with the audience about that?
Yeah, so the major thing with the first impression is that you have to realize that first impression, your brain can make a first impression within 1/50th of a second, which is insanely fast. And even faster than that, your brain can identify images within 1/13th of a second. Now, this is why it's critical to understand who it is that's coming to that page and what they've been exposed to in the first place, because basically by the time your page loads, they've already made a decision as to whether or not you're trustworthy. They don't even realize they've made a decision as to whether or not you're trustworthy.
Right.
It's just happened. And everything that happens from a cognitive standpoint is just, okay, now I'm on the page and now I've decided this is a trustworthy page or it's not a trustworthy page. Let me read the headline. Let me read the copy. Let me read all of this type of stuff. But if you don't nail that first impression, they're going to click that back button, right? As designers and as optimizers, as people who create these pages, we kind of think like, oh, they're going to get on this page and they're going to read the call to action or they're going to read the headline. They're going to really take the time. No, that's not how people. When was the last time you read all of a page that you landed on? You don't. Nope. It doesn't happen that way. You have to get people to hook. You have to hook them as fast as possible. And then hope that they read the rest of the stuff on the page.
Yeah, because even in the composition, when you're creating that story, as you talked about, that visual hierarchy, they usually look at a photo first and then maybe read the headline, but they don't necessarily even need to really read the page, and they should basically know what you're selling.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is like they need to be able to, within moments, right? And I can't even like reasonably describe how fast this happens, but within nanoseconds, really, they need to be able to see themselves on that page.
Yep.
And then decide if that's, see themselves on that page in the most ideal light possible, because you got to remember they have a problem that needs to be solved most of the time. And they need to be able to see themselves. Basically, the page needs to reflect to them what their life is like after the problem has been solved. Yeah. I think that's the best way that I can put that. And then from there, if they decide like that okay, that's going to happen, now I'm going to take the time to really start to analyze the rest of the page. But if within that first 50th of a second they don't see themselves and their problem and their life being much better, they're not going to take the time to read they're not going to take the time to read anything. Because who wants to bother? I don't see my solution on the other side. I don't see what my happy life is going to look like. So why bother? I'm going to go find somebody else who does this right.
Yeah, it's the classic book, one of my favorites, Don't Make Me Think.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I think there's actually a test that you can do as a designer or even a marketer. Literally, you want to close your eyes for a second, and within the moments that you open your eyes, if you don't know what they're selling, or essentially what we'll talk about next, that compelling value proposition really is, then you've already made a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the UVP, or however you want to say it, the compelling value proposition, what is that? And give us some ideas of how people can improve their value proposition on your landing pages.
Sure. So the unique selling proposition is basically what you do, who you're for, what you do, and how you do it better than everybody else. Right. We've actually talked about this quite a bit on ConversionXL. Pep has a really good article on value propositions with examples, and then I've talked about how to do that in a crowded market. But basically, it's what makes you better than the other guy. What makes you the best solution right now? Some really good examples of that would be Airbnb. Their value proposition is very simple: find a place to stay.
Yeah,
it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. or Stripe, which is payments for developers, right? Or I might be misquoting that, but it's who you're for and what you do. And I think what happens is that we try to complicate things, right? We go like, I need to be interesting and funny or compelling, and that can happen further down the road once you have brand recognition.
Right.
But if this is a person's first experience with your brand, you need to tell them very quickly who you are, or who you're for, what you do, and how it's better. There's some really great examples out there of this in action.
We make websites sell.
Yeah, we make websites sell. There we go. Let's go with the Marketect one. That's really what it's all about. You just have to be very plain, because after the person lands on your landing page and decides very quickly if this is what they're for, then they're going to take the time to read. And if they say, oh, okay, I guess that's what I'm here for, right? Then you're going to be able to go from there. The other problem that we found is that message match is a huge issue out there, right? You kind of put that in the questions to me. Ideally, your value proposition is going to include some of the keywords that are being used on that landing page. If I were to go look for financial advice, and then I land on a page that says, I help you something with money, blah, blah, blah.
Investor relations or whatever.
Yeah, investor relations. It doesn't match up, right? And that moment of the idea of like talking about an interactive story, you want somebody to go to the bottom of the page. That moment, where you make them go like, you switch gears, and someone goes, is this really what I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Right? You lose fluidness. You lose that flow, and it breaks the experience, right? The more you make a person think when they're on that page, the less likely they're going to be to take action, because they're more focused on thinking instead of solving problems.
Yeah, you see that a lot with bigger companies that kind of work in silos. The pay-per-click optimization process is a lot different than the landing page optimization process, and is a lot different than the conversion process. And they each are using different companies in their own silo, and everything's almost automated, that the messages never really match it.
Yeah, and the other part is, and I've seen this with kind of the smaller and medium-sized companies too, is that you've got one person doing all of the work.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that some of the laziness, and I say laziness, and I don't mean it as like, oh, you're being lazy, but some of the laziness that comes about it is because you're trying to turn out so much stuff so fast that you're trying to go after as many keywords as possible all at once, have those all point to a single page, and hope that you're going to get some conversions, and you probably will.
Yep.
But that experience, you're not getting as many as you probably could, because you're not creating, small targeted groups of keywords for very specific pages. Ideally, you would create multiple pages for multiple groups of keywords and still include some of the message match for each, because your value proposition is going to be different for who your market is too. It doesn't have to be, and this is the other thing that I've found with companies that I've worked with, is that we try to get so locked into, we have to have this catchy phrase, we have to have this trendy catchy phrase, and it doesn't have to be that way. Your value proposition can be, switched around a little bit if it's going to help people understand who you're for and what you do.
Oh yeah.
Right? And I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there are plenty of companies who shift it just a little bit to show like, hey, we're here for you too.
Yeah, or just including the keyword that they searched for in the headline somewhere. Just having that kind of little relevance really can make a big difference in your conversions.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some other ways that people can do landing pages differently. What have you seen from people using like video on their landing page?
Generally speaking, there have been anywhere between 65 and 85% conversion rates lifted from video. And that's a very compelling statistic that would make people go like, oh, we need to do video. But there's a couple of things that go around that. One, is video going to be right for your company, right? There was an example on the Visual Website Optimizer blog that they were talking about in a nursing home who used video on their landing page, and the static image was actually outperform the video. And I think a lot of that has to do with internet service provider, age of the customer coming to the page, or the prospect coming to the page, and basically the message of the video itself, right? I think a lot of us will go, oh, let's do this thing, and then think the thing is going to be what solves the problem. If I said, let's make a movie and it's going to make $1 million or $10 million, that's only going to happen in certain systems. The stuff still has to be good.
Yeah.
So video can be useful and beneficial if you are taking that idea of message match and you're demonstrating something over video that can't be described as easily in text or images alone. That's a very, very important distinction. So I don't want to just say like, oh, 65 to 85% of customers will buy because of a video, and then say, everybody go do videos. It's not always going to be the case. It has to be able to do something that text and images alone can't. Fortunately, there's a lot of cases where that is the case, right? You can describe a product much better over video. You can use sound and sight and camera techniques and time-tested emotional filmmaking techniques to draw more out of your audience than you could if you were just doing images and text. You can demonstrate products much faster. Software, show me how it works and where I need to go and do all that type of stuff. MailChimp used to have a great kind of explainer GIF on their site that showed, this is just how simple it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you can do with it, but you have to also figure out if it's going to be right for your customers. If your customers are older or are in spots where they don't have a great internet connection or are at work when they're supposed to be, coming to your landing page, or around noisy kids all day.
Yeah.
Like there are factors that will contribute. Like my wife says, I hate listening to videos, or I hate it when a page has video because I can't watch it with the kids around.
Right.
That's all stuff that needs to be taken into consideration when you're going, is this going to work for my company?
If you have video testimonials from your clients or people using it, then it's just reinforcing, why people should use your product or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing. Like MBunts has a great testimonial video for their explainer video.
Yep.
That uses Nemo Chu from Kissmetrics.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That does something that you can't do over text and images alone for two reasons. One, Nemo's kind of showing what the product does.
Right.
But the other part, and this is the part that I think really works about that video, is that Nemo is in a position that me, Mr. Ideal Target Market, is in. That's my job. My job as a director of growth. My job is to bring more money into my business. Yeah. Nemo is me, right? I don't have the cool dreads like Nemo, but Nemo is me. And he's telling me that the product that I'm considering right now is worth it for me.
Right.
So that's something to also consider, is like if you're using a video in a video testimonial type of way, you're doing more, you're doing that whole bringing your customer, you have to reflect it. And Nemo is a great example of that. So,
yeah. And that leads us to the next step in the landing page optimization guide. And you'll be able to get to the full guide through the show notes at marketingoptimization.tv. But the next step really is the importance of social proof, authority, and testimonials. Give us some of the findings that you found when doing the research for this guide related to social proof.
So there's a psychological phenomenon called implicit egoism, which is basically saying we are looking for, in products and other people, things that reflect us, right? It goes back to the thing I was just saying about Nemo. And basically, the more something is like us, the more we're going to trust that it's going to be right for us. It's this sort of herd mentality that is ingrained in us as people. And it's easy as a entrepreneur to say like, oh, I don't subscribe to that. It's just biology. It's just how it is. So accept it, and then look for that in your customers, because we're all looking for that sort of validation. There was a study done that shows that when brand advocacy is brought up by 12%, that it can have a 2x impact on revenue growth. And it's also been documented that 63% of the customers will buy something if it shows testimonials or reviews from people who are just like them.
Yeah.
So being able to show that and bring that out on a landing page is already scientifically proven and researched that it's going to help you out. But it also has to be stuff, you can't just have like any customer, right? It has to be that reflection of who I am, right? I was doing research I actually had an author contribute about testimonials, and one of the things was, if the CEO of a company, if Bill Gates was to say my product is awesome, that's great, but there's also you incorporate a level of doubt, right? If I'm not the CEO of my company and I'm looking for a product that's for me specifically, if I see the CEO of another company giving a testimonial on something, it might not have as much impact as somebody who's in a position that's very similar to mine. And that goes back to the whole implicit egoism thing. So it's important that your testimonials are people that reflect who your ideal market is. But then the other part is if you have authority figures, like Inc. magazine or Forbes or industry publications, that it's stuff that people are going to already be familiar with, right? I have to be able to read this stuff and know what it is right away. If I was on a botany website, for example, looking for seeds, it wouldn't really matter to me who their who their authority figures were, because that's not my field. You know what I mean?
Let's give some people some actionable advice related to, maybe copywriting and call to actions. What have you found in your research that really has helped improve the conversions there?
It comes back to message match. When you do that qualitative research, what you're really looking for is you're really looking for those phrases that people use to describe what the pain point is. Basically, if you do enough qualitative research and you're looking for those trends, a lot of the copy will end up writing itself, right? And that sounds really cliche, because a lot of people will say that and then not do the research. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing that qualitative research, you're going to find out what exactly those pain points are. And if you've been tweaking the product a little bit to make it for that ideal customer, or if you reframe what your product does to make it right for that customer, you're basically describing their problem back to them in their own words. And then same goes for the call to action, right? Once you know what those triggers are, you have to do the research ahead of time to know what that, basically what's going to grab their attention throughout the copy.
Right.
Now, there's another part to that, right? Obviously, you can A/B test copy and headlines and call to actions and stuff like that. But the other part is you want to make sure that the stuff you're A/B testing is actually good. There is a process that I like to use called the peer review, where I'll take, and this was not invented by me, but you take 5 or 6 people and you go through line by line and ask and rate on a scale of 1 to 4. Does this make me want to read more?
Oh, wow.
Very simple. Mm-hmm. But when you get, 4 is absolutely yes, I can't wait, and 1 is like, yeah. When you get an average score from people, you get, and you're rating it on gut reaction, right? When you get that average score, you get a really good feel for what that copy is, and if it's actually going to get people to do more, which is kind of a whole 180-degree shift from the traditional copy review process, where it's like, this is garbage, rewrite it, make me feel better. Like, no, if you have a group of people saying, yes, this makes me want to read more, or kinda, or not really, and then you get specific suggestions from people. So instead of saying people like such and such product, it's 86% of people prefer, this product over brand A over brand B, yeah. Right? When you get those sort of specific copy suggestions, what usually ends up happening is the copy becomes better. Sure. And it's because it's a small group of people. And what I like to do is, after that process has been done, take it to a small sample of my market, right? I can reach out to people over LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, right? You can do a small ad, right? Do a Facebook ad with a small budget, get the right people to the page, and just ask for, survey them. Mm-hmm. Give them a $25 gift card to Amazon, something very simple, very small, and really get feedback on that copy and that call to action. That's going to help, make your tests more informed instead of just going, I think maybe A is going to be better or maybe B is going to be better, and you waste a bunch of time putting it out there. You have real feedback that informs both decisions.
Yeah, well, that was something that I've always lived by, because you can't assume that you are writing the right copy or creating the right messages. And the key right there is feedback. If you have a good feedback loop, you're going to be able to find out a lot of things that you weren't even thinking of. Because especially as a designer or a copywriter, you tend to work in silos, and it sounds great to you, but
Mm-hmm.
you'll find, some clear wins from having other people give you feedback, so you can just make everything better. And that works with any kind of product launch or page or copy or headline, or unique value proposition. The more feedback you get and the quicker that feedback loop happens, you'll be able to iterate faster and make better changes.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I want to add to that too is that there is actually science that backs up that your brain will trigger the sensory parts of your body, right? If you're using language that corresponds with those senses. So if you're saying, I feel the grit, or feel the grit of the road, or your heart thumping out of your chest, or the sweat stinging in your eyes, that's much better than just like, oh, it's going to be a good run. If you are using descriptive language like that, that really appeals to each of those senses, you're going to be engaging different parts of that person's brain, which, of course, will get them wanting to read more if you're doing it well. Copy cannot be skimped on. The other part is that people have been shown to be more engaged when everything is being told over storytelling, right? Instead of going, here's features, benefits, products, and that's what we talk about a lot, right? We talk about features and benefits, and this is who it's for, and da da da. That's great, but there's a great example from the guys over at the Lean Startup Machine, where they were A/B testing, or they were testing or validating an idea for a Vespa, right? A Vespa rental service, and what they ended up doing was they eventually found their product market fit by creating a landing page that was talking about. Imagine how cool it would be driving around town on your Vespa with your skinny tie and your scarf, and your hipster glasses and vest, and that's what got people really into it. If you just said Vespa's for rental, who cares? But if you tell me what my life is going to be like once I'm using this thing, and you tell me the story of how cool things are going to be for me afterwards, that makes me really, really want to figure out what the next chapter is. And usually the next chapter is gated behind that call to action. Yeah. So there's all sorts of science that backs up telling a good story and then appealing to the senses that will make the rest of the experience much, much better for everybody.
Yeah, and it goes just right back to making your customers see themselves in your product.
Yep. Absolutely. Perfect.
And we teased on it throughout the whole interview, but really it does come down to the last step, and it's really A/B testing. Test everything. So do you have any basically actionable advice for someone who's just getting started with A/B testing?
Make sure you have good hypothesis, right? Don't form your A/B test ideas and this was a big challenge that I had when I first started with the optimization process. Is I would say I have this idea, and then the client would say, no, I have this idea, and I go, okay, let's test and see which one works better. And it's when you both have good hypothesis as to why something is going to work, and you have a good metric that you're trying to measure against. We want to increase A, and we're going to do this by doing this to B, and there should be a change in C, right? Then you can have much more informed decisions when you do A/B tests. But if you're just kind of going well, this headline's going to get more clicks. No, this headline's going to get more clicks. It's once you have those hypotheses formed behind your A/B testing, you're going to have a much clearer test throughout the whole entire process. So have a hypothesis first, test something that you're measuring, and know what you're measuring, and then go from there.
Let's conclude by telling people how they can find out more about ConversionXL.com and maybe your Twitter as well.
Sure. You can go to ConversionXL.com/blog to read the blog. or conversionxl.com/landing-page-optimization to see the guide we're talking about. You're going to link to it in the show notes. And you can find me on Twitter at TommyIsMyName.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Tommy.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you for watching the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Designs. Please remember to subscribe to all of the videos in my YouTube channel. Thank you.